Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 15 of the Natural Female Muscle Podcast. Today, we are joined by YASMIN HODGE. YASMIN is an absolutely incredible natural bikini athlete. Not only is she just your average natural bikini athlete, but she is the individual who most recently won the NBW Classic Bikini Overall title, which was incredible, and attained her qualification for Worlds with that, which will actually have happened, I think, by the time this episode goes out, but currently she's about a week out from that, so we're very appreciative to have you on today whilst you're a week out. But alongside a competitive career, like Yas is also has an incredible career in the healthcare industry, where for the past 4 years specifically, she's worked as a Resuscitation Trauma Practitioner within a major trauma hospital, which is something that's incredible on its own, but will be remarkable to see how you balance that with bodybuilding and prep and everything too. So, very excited to talk to you about your experience with live, with bodybuilding and everything. So Yas, thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, love. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I've actually not spoken to you properly since obviously a win when I gave you the overall trophy.
I know.
How has all that kind of sank in since this weekend?
It's taken some time, actually. I think I was so focused this season with my prep on just getting to show day that I didn't really have time beforehand to process that there might have been results at the end of the day. I had my first competitive season, as you know, back in 2021, and it gave me a lot of insight into what competing was about and whether I would enjoy it. And I enjoyed it so much, but I had always had my mindset on competing for a natural federation. And thankfully, the NBW Classic fell really nicely. So that was what I'd aimed for this year. But after having an off season for over a year, and I don't like to have like goals set, like I'm going to place here, I'm going to place here. I just have high expectations of myself, and I wanted to bring something like special to me for this, like to the stage. But because I knew what to expect through prep, I think I was just so focused on just doing the do every single day that placing first not only in my class, which was just, I think from the reaction I had on stage, was a bit jaw-dropping. But then going on to win the overall, it was so special. But it was such a long day that at the time you're on such a high, I didn't really process anything. And then I went straight back into night shifts the week following. So I was on a completely different like time schedule to everybody else, and received lots of messages and congratulations, and it hadn't sunk in because I was so tired all week. And this last week has been like, oh, I did that. And I keep walking past the trophies in my house like, oh my gosh, they're mine. It's so special, and it's obviously got me my qualification for the Worlds, which will be in a week. And I'm very, very excited. Very excited.
Yeah, it's very exciting, but ultimately it was so well deserved, and you brought a much improved package as well from the last time that you stepped on stage, which, as we always say, is like the most important thing that kind of really matters. But I think one thing that's so evident with your physique and is why you won the overall was that you were just perfect for bikini. Like, you displayed all of the perfect areas criteria, like perfect leanness, perfect balance, perfect flow. How do you actually like manage like peaking that into the show? Do you guys do anything like different or specific? Because you can't be too lean, you can't be too hard, you can't be too soft. Do you guys do anything specific with that?
So I actually have a different coach from my first season compared to this season. In my first season, I had about a 6-month off season training out of my garage because of COVID. I'd never done a prep before. Well, I'd never been that lean. I'd been lean prior to that, but I was a runner before I started bodybuilding. So I was used to just not having like a high level of body fat, but not having a considerable amount of muscle either. So I didn't know how lean I needed to be. And for the federation I did the first time round, it's kind of expected, like, to look part on the stage that you have to be fairly lean. For the natural shows, I was a bit nervous because I felt like I would be coming in softer, but after having such a long off season, I've got more muscle mass that allowed me to come in full, and we had that play time to have a trial peak leading up to this show. So we tried, in my peak we manipulated food, but we didn't manipulate salt and water drastically. Just because I was 2 weeks out and we still had a bit of work to do, and that was fine. But the trial went really nicely. So we just tried exactly the same thing, and I trust my coach to know what to do with my body. We've been together a year now. We've done a decent off season together, and I have all the knowledge that I had from my previous prep to share with him. So this time around we did manipulate salt and water just a touch, but on show day, I think before I stepped on stage, because I was on stage later than we'd initially expected, a lot later. I don't think I drank necessarily as much as we'd expected, but it worked out to be the perfect amount. And we checked in sort of every 2 hours with each other with photos, and that dictated when I ate and how the day went. And it was really smooth. I've never drank that much before stepping on stage. It feels kind of criminal to have had like about 3 liters of water and then step on, but I felt the best I've ever felt prior to stage time. And it meant that I didn't have any stresses whatsoever. So when I did step on stage, and it was like, had this free feeling. I could just enjoy the time that I was up there, because it's over so quickly.
You could really tell that, like, you were just happy to be there and so confident. And I think that that's a huge thing, like with pretty much most athletes, but definitely with like most categories outside of bodybuilding, like not very much is really going to change in those like final moments. Like once you have a look and you know, cool, this is where we need to be, like you did with practicing the peak the week before, practicing some trials, you don't really need to change or manipulate too much. You can just keep the look as it is, make sure that nothing drastically goes wrong, and, you know, just carry that. You know, if you're ready, you're ready. You know, you don't need to change anything.
Exactly. And it took so much stress out of peak week, knowing that I was just going to be repeating the same thing that I'd already done. And it made coming to the actual show day that the only thing I could focus on show day was stage time, and it was just doing my makeup, doing my hair, getting glammed up, you know, what you essentially look forward to when that day comes, and just showing off what you worked so hard to achieve. I think if you're not ready prior to that, no matter what you manipulate in the week leading up to or the day of the show, it's maybe not going to be the look that you're after. But I was really grateful to have had that time to have trialed.
And you just absolutely nailed it. Is that something that you guys are maybe carrying through now into the Worlds? I don't know if the Worlds qualification was something you were expecting, because now that's throwing another show in the mix. How are you feeling leading into that?
I feel really good, surprisingly. I'm considerably more tired this week, but I've worked some really long, busy shifts. So we're just managing fatigue at the minute, and nothing's changed in terms of diet. Nothing's changed in terms of training. I've had probably a couple more rest days than expected, but when I'm at work, I spend like upwards of 15 hours on my feet. So sometimes it's nice to just come home and be told, no more cardio this evening, just put your feet up and have a cup of tea, which is really nice. I feel good, really, really quite good actually. I've got the same approach, I think, as the NBW is that I don't have any expectations for this show.
Yeah.
The standard and the number of athletes is going to be phenomenal, and it's just going to be amazing to be part of the day. I definitely didn't expect to be given my invitation, but I hadn't even thought about placings at the NBW Classic, so I think it all just came as a bit of a shock. But I am very excited. I feel very relaxed going into this. I think we're going to run a similar approach to last time, and all I could do was come in a bit tighter, so without changing too much, because I wouldn't have placed first in my class or won the overall with the look that I had it not been the right look for my category.
100%. And you've got to make sure, like with bikini, you can't go outside of that criteria because you'll get marked down.
Yeah.
So else do that is like they go show to show and they're like, oh, okay, so I guess I've got another show, so I need to get leaner. It's like, no, please don't change anything.
Yeah, literally, just sometimes all you need to do is cruise it, and it can feel quite difficult to sort of pull your foot off of the gas, essentially, because you've been chipping away for weeks and weeks and weeks leading up to your first show. But if you nail it, why change too much?
Yeah, 100%.
There's no need to be drastic in that sense, and there's not a great deal you can do in terms of the time between shows. 3 weeks has been long enough to make some significant change, but not a drastic change, because that's not what we want.
No. Do you mentally find that like you say, almost like quite challenging, because you're constantly in bodybuilding as a whole, you're either progressing up or you're progressing by coming down? Do you find that weird, just trying to obviously make slight improvements, but mainly just hold? Because obviously you're not going to be really, really pushing for fat loss or really pushing to make the look fuller. You're just kind of trying to keep things in a good spot. Does that get mentally quite difficult on some days?
Some days, yeah, because you're so in the mindset of doing X, Y, and Z every single day. Do this amount of cardio, you do this with your food, you do this amount of steps, or you do this sort of activity level.
Yeah.
So when a hold is put on it, sometimes I've had the few extra rest days, just half the amount of cardio or no cardio and no training at all, and it is a bit okay. And you do what you're told because you trust the person who's coaching you.
Yeah.
And if I'm not going to do what I'm told, why am I paying them to coach me?
100%.
I enjoy training. Even in this interim period, it is nice to just get in the gym because it's an environment that I'm happy in.
Yeah.
So not going to the gym, I think not making that journey into the gym and seeing regular gym goers and familiar faces, that's probably the harder part. But I am appreciative of the rest, and I know that even though at that moment in time I'm feeling like I do want to do cardio or I want to move my body, I know the day after my body will really appreciate it, my mind will appreciate it, I'll feel fresher, especially if I've got to go into a shift at work.
Yeah.
And it is difficult, yeah, at times, but it's nowhere near as difficult as it has been previously.
Yeah, definitely. I think the good thing is that you at least are confident in where you're at, and that's the most important thing. And as long as you always have trust in your coach, that's the biggest thing, because it's always the loss of direction that makes things difficult. But as long as you have trust in the person that's helping you, and it's the same thing like post show as well, isn't it? When you have to maybe rest more or do less or whatever it is, and you have to just have trust and faith in that person. And when you've built up that relationship, it makes that whole phase, that whole process, and all of the phases across bodybuilding and prep really just so much easier.
Definitely, yeah, I have to agree there. I think the thing that's probably propelling me forward the most is knowing that I have another show to aim towards,
Yeah.
so that I'm not digging or doing anything drastic in this time frame. I am just trying to bring a fresh look, a tighter look, but one that's had some rest. It can be hard to manage that, I think, sometimes, because depending on how you approach your first show or how many shows into the season you are, you naturally display fatigue in your physique. And I think even if you mentally feel it, but you don't necessarily look it in your body, it can carry across. I guess that's how presenting yourself on stage definitely comes across. If you don't look happy to be there, your entire physique doesn't look happy to be there. So yeah, getting my qualification for the Worlds and knowing that that's only 3 weeks, was only 3 weeks away, it's now a week away, has definitely been like that oomph to carry me through the days that maybe feel a bit odd.
Yeah. Is that where are you planning on that kind of being your last show this season, or have you got any more shows planned afterwards?
I don't know yet.
No.
I don't know yet. I'm sorry if my coach hears this before I tell him.
There's never really any pressure though, is there? It's just you can go through shows and see how you feel. I think a lot of people sometimes, I see it with first timers as well, where they look at a season and they'll map out like 10 shows. I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna be like dying by the end of that. Just see how you feel after the first one.
Yeah, so that's definitely my approach this year. Take each show as it comes. Like, I only focused on the NBW Classic, and then obviously got my qualification, so I'm only focusing on the Worlds. What happens at the Worlds may dictate what I do for the rest of the year. I don't know yet. I know that I only want to compete with UKDFBA this year, and that qualifying for the Worlds, I also got my qualification for the British, which is October, which is a long way away.
Yeah.
When you've been dieting for a long time. So it'll probably be a little diet break, have a little think about what I want to do when I've got some more food in me, talk things through with my coach, and then ultimately there may be 1 or 2 shows at the end of the year, or I might just end my 2023 season after the Worlds. But watch this space. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Well, definitely, I want to go through sort of like what the comparison was like with sort of like your first season to this one as well, and 100% talking about like your works. You've touched on that quite a little bit as well. That plays a huge role, and we'll come on to that shortly. But I do want to just like pull things back a little bit, because you've given like a really good insight in terms of where you're at now and what has obviously got you to winning that overall and in this position, which is incredible. But what was like the background context to that? What was it that really got you into bodybuilding, into training in the first place? You say training is something that you love, which is amazing, and I'm sure that was like the root of it. But do you want to like I'd love to know as well, you know, what was it that just got you into everything in the first place, and then how did that transition over to actually competitive bodybuilding as well?
So I was never, like, previously a gym goer before I started bodybuilding. I've been into gyms, but because I have a background of running, if I was in a gym, it was probably because I was like time trialing on a treadmill. Like, most of my running has been done outside. But I love something that I can do on my own. Because of the work that I do, I can't always make team sports or certain times or certain days for training. So running was something that I could just do whenever, wherever. It didn't matter if I wasn't relying on somebody else, or somebody wasn't relying on me to be there. But in 2020, obviously, well, in 2020, with the start of COVID, I'd really enjoyed running for years up until that point, until we were locked down. As you've already mentioned, I work in A&E in a major trauma centre, and for months, all we saw were COVID patients, and all we did was intubate COVID patients or really sick patients of any kind.
Yeah.
Nobody turned up to A&E unless you were blue lighted in by an ambulance. You had to be super unwell, and it was like working in a ghost town, but not. You
Yeah.
were so mentally drained come the end of the day. You couldn't really flick the TV on because every single news channel was COVID, 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 COVID. No one can see their friends. Everyone's feeling miserable. The only free time you get is to get your food shopping and to go outside for your daily activity.
Yeah.
So I ran like I always did, but running then, like, for me was a challenge towards myself, but also time for me to clear my headspace. But it just became something that I did religiously every single day, and I'd clock up like 70 to 100 kilometers a week just trying to clear my head after a 12.5 hour shift. And it stopped becoming enjoyable.
Yeah.
So I turned to the other thing that I really enjoy, and that's cooking. So I cooked an awful lot, but I wanted to challenge myself during that time period to eat less meat. So I became a pescatarian.
Yeah.
And it was great for a while, but then I realized quite quickly that I was underfueling my body for the amount of running I was doing.
Yeah, sure.
And I got into this sort of cat and mouse cycle in my head: go to work, come home, run, cook food, feel tired, feel fatigued, and I just struggled to get out of it. I live about 150, 200 miles away from my family, so I didn't have people locally to me, and I hadn't long since moved to the Midlands, so I didn't really have a great like friend support network. I have some people who have been brilliant this entire time, but when you can't see each other, it's the messaging becomes the same old thing, and we're all in healthcare, so we all have the same feelings outside of work. So I reached out and found my first coach, who took on the challenge of trying to coach a pescatarian, and I invested in equipment for the garage, and I did what everybody else in lockdown did when they wanted to start something new. But one day I just stopped running completely and just threw my absolute everything into trying to change the way my body looked. But trying to replicate the same feeling that running gave me. And it did exactly that. It gave me that same headspace, that same freedom, but I was actually getting something out of it rather than feeling fatigued. I was feeling energized. I was eating better. I generally felt like I was doing something for myself now, and not just because I felt like I had to. I felt like I had to go for a run, whereas I wanted to get in the garage and train. It made such a difference. And as 2020 sort of came to a close, things started to open up, and stepped foot back in the gym, and it was a whole different world because it wasn't my garage anymore. But I very quickly felt comfortable in the gym that I train in, and the people made me feel really welcome. And it was nice to be surrounded by people who were doing the same thing for the same reasons. Training because they want to, because it makes them feel good, because they enjoy it. And it's infectious sometimes, that the energy you get from people and the passion that they want to share with you, it is such a good feeling. The gym has essentially become a second home. Like, it's an environment I am so comfortable in. And it just progressed from there, I suppose. I had to change my plan a bit because it obviously wasn't the garage plan. And learning new movements was tricky. But I think that's the same with everything. Even when you change a movement in your plan getting comfortable with how it feels and your body mechanism and altering things so it works for you. It is challenging, but it was the best thing I ever did for myself. And at the time, I didn't have any inclination to compete whatsoever. That's not why I got a coach.
No.
I wanted direction. And then one day I just said to my coach, I want to give this competing a go. What? I was like, yeah, I want to give it a go because I'm so used to challenging myself, and it would put me so out of my comfort zone. I am definitely not the person who gets glammed up regularly, and I definitely am not the person who would pop on a bikini and step on stage in front of a whole load of people that I don't know. But I've done it a handful of times now, and it's been the best experience, and I probably won't stop. So, but that's where my bodybuilding started. The more I learned with my coach, the more I wanted to learn on my own.
Yeah.
And we had a great run for the first competitive season I ever did. And I'll always be really, really grateful for that, because it did teach me a lot about myself, my self-resilience, my self-confidence. That all grew massively. But it also helped me understand what I wanted out of bodybuilding, and certainly out of competing, and I wanted more. So I then took to looking into like online lessons, things like that, things that would teach me more. I was reading more outside of the gym and outside of work. I kind of ground to a bit of a halt. What I was sort of receiving from my coach, I felt like I needed to advance, and I found somebody who could provide me that.
Yeah.
And all it's done is drive my passion forward for competing in bodybuilding even more. So it's all been very positive. It's all been a huge learning curve, but it's been very positive.
No, that's amazing. It sounds like when I listened to you talk about it, especially when you explained that initial part that you were in COVID, when you'd moved away from your family, which is a big thing, like when you're in your early stage of your career and you're on your own and you're also working in healthcare in COVID, that's so demanding. And then you find this thing that almost like, did it almost feel like it kind of has transformed your life quite significantly with the passion it's given you, the direction that it's given you, with everything on that front?
Yeah, it has, definitely. And part of that is like through what I've learned, and part of it is through the people that I've met.
Yeah,
it has opened, like, running has been brilliant and such an individual sport. You can do it with people, but for me, it's always been something that I did on my own. But bodybuilding, despite it being a very individual sport, it's not. It's really not. It's not this lonely sport that people quite often say it is. It has brought me close to so many people and into environments with people who share the same passions, and it's a special place to be. Yes, you may prep on your own. You may have a different off-season plan to somebody else and be doing that on your own. You may step on stage on your own, but you're never on your own the entire way through it.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. It is really nice. It's given me a real sense of like homeliness.
Yeah, I massively agree with that. It upsets me sometimes when I hear people say that they maybe feel lonely in bodybuilding, or like it is a lonely sport. I'm just like, don't be afraid to like reach out to people and like let people be a part of your process, because that's one of the most incredible things that you can get out of bodybuilding is the people you meet. Like people at shows, like other competitors or other people that are just passionate about bodybuilding. Like it really feels like a family. And I know you feel like this because you're a part of it as well, but like when you go to the UKDFBA shows or you go to the trips that they go, you literally feel like you're on a family holiday.
Yeah, massive dysfunctional family, but it's perfect. It is just like that.
Yeah, but it makes a huge difference. And like on that note, as well as I've just touched on it, what was the thing that then shifted you? Because you competed with PCA in your first season. You did the First Timers, where you took second and then came third in Britain in 2021, which is also immense, especially for PCA, which as much as a lot of athletes are natural, not all of them are. So it is ultimately a more challenging playing field. What was it that then like enabled you to make that decision to compete with the UKDFBA from this year and to not look towards sort of like non-tested feds anymore?
So I've always been natural, and natural shows are something that I wanted to do in my first year.
Okay.
But because of COVID and things reopening the way that they did, the timeline meant that UKDFBA didn't have a novice show that year.
Yes, yeah.
So it allowed me to start my prep a little bit later and aim to do a first timers show. So my first show with PCA was a September first timers, meaning that yes, it was untested, but I would only be stepping on stage with people who had never stepped on stage before.
Yeah.
So we were all in the same boat, and that kind of gave me like a comfort blanket in the sense that I wasn't going to be the first person on that stage who had no idea what they were doing and had no trial run and didn't know what to expect, because these people have all competed before, because that wasn't the case. The option to do UKDFBA Midland show was there, but it fell the week before my first timers.
Yeah. And
I knew that there was always a possibility. One, the Midland show isn't first timers, so quite a lot of people would have had stage time previously. But coming off the back of COVID, quite a lot of people have been consistently training because they were intending to compete in 2020. So they've already had a significantly long off season and maybe started a prep, which had been cancelled prior to COVID. Then gone back into an off season and were aiming for the Midland show. I didn't go into competing my first show with the mindset of I'm going to do really well. I just didn't, much like most people, didn't want to feel like I was the bottom of the pack before I'd even started. And I knew that doing an open show essentially could have possibly made me feel quite daunting.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't have any experience of competing, so I didn't want it to be tainted, I guess, from the start. And obviously I had that experience with the first timers, and the British was only 3 weeks after again, so I did the British with little to no expectations, but just to gain more stage time. And placed third, which was really quite surprising, but really nice. And knew after that I wanted to take the time out to focus on a bit of balance in my off season, focus on growing some muscle tissue. Spent a lot of time traveling last year and around the world with my partner, who obviously competes, and gaining more insight into how a natural federation works, how it runs, how it feels to be part of. And it just reconfirmed that doing a natural federation was something that I wanted to do. So I was like, right, going to do the NBW.
No, that's awesome. I'm actually really glad you touched on the whole like first timers thing, because I've literally just had a conversation with one of my clients about this, because the first timers show obviously falls after, or is it before the like first like, or the last qualifier. So you either had the choice of doing like the natural show or the first time.
Yes.
You can't do either or. And we literally said very similar to like what you said, where it's like, yes, you'd love to do a natural show, which ultimately, you know, future seasons, you have the ability to do that. But in order for you to just go and have that day where the first show day experience can truly be just very relaxed, where you know with those other people that haven't done multiple seasons or aren't very experienced athletes, or like even you could get into a show where you're against like previous people who've won British titles, and that can be really intimidating on your first show day. And I think it's a really good idea to do that if that's something that makes you feel more comfortable. Are you really glad that you did that for your first season?
I am, yeah. I mean, I didn't have anything to compare it to, which did help, but the energy shared by everybody was exactly the same. A little bit nervous, very excited. There was no, I've done this before, no bravado, and it made the whole experience quite nice. But getting that experience of show time, like stage time, with people who have also never been on stage, if you do make a mistake, it doesn't matter. And I think there being first timer shows does encourage that it really doesn't matter, because you've never done this before. You know, you can practice and practice and practice and practice leading up to it and have it absolutely perfect and have your routine nailed and peak perfectly. But the minute you stand on stage and you're absolutely boiling under lights, you can't see anything because it's so bright. You've got someone calling numbers out and you're just a bit like, oh, dazed. It can just go in one ear and straight out the other.
Yeah.
So giving yourself time to have that first timers experience, I think it was priceless for me to have had that. And I would recommend it to other people, whether they do a novice show right at the beginning of the year with a natural fed, or if they are ready for a show later in the year, I would recommend doing a first timers show. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, exactly. And do you think, as you've come into now actually having your first experience with a natural federation, has that been something that you've really enjoyed, and now you can kind of see where you want to go in the sport?
Yes. Yeah. Like I've said, like I knew I ultimately wanted to compete with a natural federation, but now I have like a comparison essentially. I had a great competitive first season. It was really good, but it wasn't ultimately what I had set my mind to do. So I knew that coming into this season, it felt like I was doing season 1 all over again, because it was a new association, and it was against people who were also natural. So I felt like I was on a level playing field. And you are judged specifically on the physique that you bring. That is what I wanted it to be about, not about anything else. And that's exactly what I got on the NBW Classic. It was a bit mind blowing, just a little bit.
But a good experience though, which is
amazing. I had the best time, and I think initially that show is just a novice show, so for it to have been novice open was quite special. It was nice to be able to see like lots of people doing what I did for the first time, because backstage there was that very new buzz, that new feeling, and lots of wide eyes, which is really special. But I would have been very happy had I been a novice doing that show. I would have been very happy with the whole experience.
Yeah, 100%. And you actually, like, just to pull a bit of a tangent off of that, you touched on obviously the fact that you went to a lot of shows last year with Isaac and got to experience that, and how like has being with Isaac and being able to kind of have him as part of your journey, and also to be able to go to his shows and see what it's been like for him to compete with natural federations, has that played a massive role in like the shift in your own bodybuilding journey for yourself?
Yes and no. We both have very different approaches.
Yeah.
Like I like routine. I'm very regimented. The whole of my off season was pretty much meal planned, and I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Because of work, I find it really easy to meal prep, so it's normal for me. We have different length preps. I'm not a sweet tooth. He's got more of a sweet tooth, and there are little things, but I think being in my off seasons the whole time he was competing, it allowed me to see how he is through a prep from the most supportive angle that I could possibly give him. And he does amaze me. He is the most relentless person I think I've ever met. He doesn't stop in and outside of competing, and it's very special to be able to share those days with him, to share like plane trips and cancelled taxis and no trains, and it's been an emotional, exciting year for him, but it's helped him prepping in the sense that he understands what I do as well. We both understand each other, and we understand a lot of each other's needs just from the fact that we've both done it before. Now he's what I would consider way more seasoned than I am. Now I'm only doing my second competitive season, and I think he's been competing since 2017. So he's had way more shows under his belt, but even his approach has been different through most of those years, and it's something we can actually converse about. Communicating, not just in a relationship, but especially if you're on prep versus somebody off prep, or currently we're both on prep. So that's been a journey in itself, but I think it can be an oversight on some people's behalf how important just communicating is, even if it is just the smallest amount. Sometimes we were literally having this conversation yesterday, how on some days you only have 20% to give, and being able to be that person who can carry that person's 20% when they're not giving, when they only have 20% is special. And I learned that about myself last year when he was competing. So through this prep together, it's been quite breezy, but it's so nice to have somebody who understands but is so supportive. Not just having a partner who understands, but the support you get from like your immediate family and your close friends, people who get you and understand what you're doing, even if they've never done it themselves. They make the effort to understand or know that you can't eat XYZ on this occasion, but that you can be present still, and that's all they want from you. They just want you to be there. It definitely, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent again.
No, that's fine.
But yes, having Isaac as a competitive partner has opened my eyes to how things can be done differently. I've never really thought much about how a male would prep, because I'm not a male. But we do have different approaches, and that's something we've been able to share with each other. It's not hindered anything. If anything, it's grown our individual knowledge of bodybuilding.
No, it's nice. And I think you've touched on the most important thing that I always make sure to bring up. It's just as long as you're communicating with the people around you and you have that support, that's really the most important thing that matters. And I'm looking forward to seeing both of you at Worlds together, which will be Lots of fun.
It will be lots of fun. We are very excited. I think it's sunk in for us both now. So I have finished my last shift at work yesterday, and that's it. No more work until after the Worlds, and he's the same. No more work until after the Worlds. So we are about to cruise our first peak week together, which is a new thing for us, both being on prep. So it will be exciting. But I think we're both feeling very calm, which is really nice. It's really nice. It's very exciting for us. It was special for me to have him there at the NBW and to share my achievements with me. So it'll be great for us both to be able to do it on the same stage.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward to seeing like both of you enjoy it. And you've obviously just mentioned that you finished the last shift as well, which is great. And on that note, we'll actually come into just how you actually manage work with everything, because you've mentioned that it is a demanding job mentally and physically. Because I think that, you know, physically you can touch on the fact that, you know, you have night shifts and you're on your feet, but it's also like, it's not like you're just sat at a desk, you know, like you're doing a lot of like mentally, like somewhat draining, but just focused stuff and stuff that can take a toll on you emotionally as well. How, like, as a whole, I know there's probably so much that goes into it, but how do you manage that both in prep and off prep as well? And how do you find that this like either has an effect or like doesn't have an effect on your bodybuilding journey?
Off season versus prep, I think management is quite different, but like the basics remain the same. Like if something happens at work that I need to talk about, I have to talk about it. And usually that's with Isaac, or pick up the phone and I call my mum and then just get it off my chest. Like the worst thing I've noticed over the years for me is to not discuss something that's bothering me.
Yeah.
But that's off and on prep. I think things sometimes emotionally affect you a little bit more when you're on prep to start with, and then you sort of reach this point where you don't really have a lot of emotion to give. so I think that's predominantly overrun by tiredness.
Yeah.
And in order to balance and sort of deal with the tiredness side of things from such long days, working night shifts, I have to get enough sleep.
Yeah.
I have to prioritize my sleep. Now, in my off season, I might be fine on like 6-7 hours sleep, and that might be all I get, but I might be eating considerably more food.
Yeah.
And might just generally have more energy. Like my walk to work doesn't feel like it takes me 2 hours when it actually only takes me 12 minutes.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like I've slogged out before I've even started my shift. So you have more vibrance to you because you just generally feel better in yourself. You've got body fat, your hormones are in a good place, you just feel human. Versus prep, energy is something that's really difficult to manage. You might wake up feeling like you've got an abundance, and then in less than 2 hours you're at 50%, and you know that you've still got the entire shift to go, and you're like, don't know how I'm going to manage this. So you have to prioritize where you expend your energy. The most important thing for me is keeping my patients alive. Yeah. So all of my energy gets expended on the concentrating on what my patients need, what they require, do their relatives need anything, communicating effectively with the people I work with, so that things get done in a timely manner, so things are as efficient as they can be. And if I can do all that without moving my feet and staying as still as possible, I'll do that to reserve even more energy. If I can, especially at this point in my prep where I'm so close to a show, if I cannot do my cardio in the morning, I won't do my cardio in the morning. I will go to work and I'll see how I feel at the end of the day, and I'll do my cardio then. Because at this point in prep, like we spoke about earlier, I am at the point where I am just cruising now. If I don't do my fasted cardio, is it realistically going to do a significant amount of damage? Whereas if I do my fasted cardio and I make a bad decision at work, could I potentially cause damage to somebody's life? That's way more important. But you also, in off season and in prep, when you work in an environment that is so fast paced and so high pressured and demanding of you, you tend to get not just a second wind, but a third, a fourth, and a fifth wind as well. Like as the day goes on, if you've been having quite a nice day, you've got a few patients and it's been quite chilled, you've had a laugh with your colleagues, you've had some food, but then all of a sudden someone has a cardiac arrest and you have to be completely switched on, you have to do your chest compressions, you have to manage an airway. You just do it because it's second nature to you. But you might feel the effects of that afterwards. Not just mentally and how that affects you after a hot debrief. We might have a chat. Everybody has like a little discussion to see how they're feeling, how things could have been run differently, how the outcome has affected them. But after that, when you get home at night, all of a sudden your head might be like ticking away and you can't switch off. But you feel so physically drained. You can't quite put your finger on why until maybe a couple of days later you're like, that's what it was. You don't necessarily feel that as much in off season. You probably do, but just not with the same intensity. So it is difficult to balance. It is difficult to balance in off season and in prep in terms of how long my days are and getting up to do cardio, going to the gym. So in off season and in prep, sessions are about an hour and a half, but I don't finish until like 8 p.m. By the time I've gotten to the gym, it's 8:30, 8:45, then we've got the train, then you come home, you have your last meal and shower, and sometimes you're not getting to bed till midnight and you're up again at 5:30, 6 a.m. the following day to go and do it all over again. But in off season, you have the energy too, and training sessions are way more enjoyable. Even if it has been a long day, you're full of food and you've got that like, oh, I can say goodbye to the end of my shift now and go and decompress in the gym. Whereas in prep, sometimes I've gotten behind the wheel of my car and thought, I can't even drive to the gym. Because the concern is like, will I fall asleep? Like, am I that tired that I actually won't make it to the gym? Or I'll get to the gym and be like, how on earth did I get here? Sometimes I walk home from a night shift and I'm like, suddenly at the front door, like, how did I get here? So it's once you've worked shifts for such a long time, you definitely get to know your body and your limitations. And it's about putting those into practice through your off season and in prep, so that you don't make silly decisions. But then on my days off, like, prioritize me time. That's something that's so important. Like even just the little things, like going to get my eyebrows done or going to have a sports massage. Doesn't matter what season it is, like you still appreciate that, not being in a fast-paced environment, being out of the house, go for long walks. Like I'm originally from the South Coast, so I miss the seaside so much. So if I can be out and about in nature, like I'm happy. And just grab a coffee and just do the little things that make you feel like you and give you that bit of energy. Listen to podcasts, Sometimes it's just as simple as putting on a film or something you've not seen in a long time, just to recharge your own social battery.
100%. You can't neglect those things that are so important to just like looking after your well-being and doing things that are like, I think people neglect just like treating themselves to like normal things. Like you don't just have to work and just go all the time. And if you do, you'll hit a big wall at some point, and making sure you give yourself the time for those things is so important. So I'm obviously very glad to hear that you put those in your routine as well, because they're definitely needed.
Oh yeah, I am slowly mastering the self-care and wellness side of things. It is important. It's very important. But I think when you do those things for yourself, you have more to give the people around you.
Yeah.
Because you are prioritizing looking after yourself. Like, how can you give 100% to people if you're not at 100%?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not just in work, but just in the relationships that you have. Just, you have to be happy and just be happy for other people.
Yeah.
It's important.
On the note of the training side of things as well, when you said, you know, sometimes you literally get behind the wheel of your car and you're like, how am I going to get to the gym? What do you do in those moments that like enables you to kind of keep pushing? I mean, I'm sure you guys actually arrange your training in a way that enables you to make it work with the work shifts that you ultimately do as well. But even just like mentally, with the fact that, like we said at the start, you know, like training is something that you did because it gave you that passion, that joy, and that love. And sometimes that can be hard as you get further into prep, and you have those moments where you're like, I'm so tired, like I don't even want to train. And you have to try and not create a negative emotion towards something that you love so much. And how do you end up like managing that on the days when you do feel so tired and the thought of going to the gym is like a real challenge?
So this prep especially has been better in the sense that my coach also works shifts.
Okay.
So understands drastically how important it is to balance fatigue management and food and training especially. So we had a different approach to my training this year. That when I was on night shifts, I would do lower rep sets. Yeah. And it made all the difference to my recovery. So whilst I was on my night shift window, if it fell on a training day, I would do lower rep sets, and that would be the end of it. We would just see how it went. And it worked so well during my off season that we implemented it during prep. I don't train between night shifts anymore like I used to. So I'll train the morning of the day I start nights. Yeah. And then if I'm on for 2 night shifts, because I do split shifts, so I work 7 night shifts over 11 days. So it is a bit on and off, on and off. Yeah. I then won't train the following day, even if it's supposed to be a training day. I'll have rest day food. And then once I've finished my second night and slept, I will train that evening. So when I'm feeling my freshest. So training times aren't the same, but it works around my shift pattern, my energy levels, food intake. Yeah. And that's definitely been a better approach. There have been very little days in this prep where I've worked a long day and after work needed to train and felt like can't. Yeah. It's been predominantly the week leading up to the first show and these last couple of weeks between shows. But thankfully, the way I've booked my leave for both shows meant that I didn't have that many like work shifts around it. I was on nights leading up to the NBW, so training fell really nicely on peak week with getting my final night shift done, resting, and then having my pump up sessions before the show. Yeah. Then I was straight back onto nights the week after, so same again. The day after show, I managed to just have a little bit of cardio and a play around in the gym, get my night shifts done, and then back to normal training. Training has just been a matter of get blood into the muscles, move some weight around. There's nothing drastic happening. But on days where, say, right at the beginning of prep, where it might have been at the end of a long day and it's just been horrendous, like all of your patients might die on you. Like that's the reality of a day in resource. All the patients you have direct contact with may pass away, and that can be a tough thing to process. So communicating with my coach is really important. If my mental headspace after a really long day isn't in it, I'm probably not going to be in it for training. And we might just agree on taking that evening off as a rest day, maybe finish off my cardio or do some extra cardio, and then revisit training the following day. So there has been a lot more freedom in moving my sessions around this time. And that's helped massively, because in my previous prep, I didn't know any different. And I just did as I was told, to the point where I would drive to the gym after a night shift, like straight after a night shift at like 8:30 in the morning, train, drive back to my house, eat, shower, go to bed, and you're getting into bed at like 2 p.m, getting up at 5, 6 o'clock to get ready for another shift, and thinking to myself, did I train this morning? Not physically being able to remember because I'm that tired.
Yeah.
One thing we've laughed about this time around is that I haven't put my keys anywhere strange. So in my last prep, I frequently put my keys in the fridge because I was so tired. I couldn't remember where I put them. This time around, I haven't misplaced anything apart from my cuffs twice, but that's fine. That's fine. They're always in the gym. It's all right. So my mental capacity has just definitely been better. I think it's because of the way that we've run like balanced recovery and training. There's no point running me into the ground by making me go to the gym and train, because I just will, like you say, fall out of love with going to the gym, because I do love training, and I do get sad when I don't get to go train, but it's risk versus reward at the minute.
Yeah.
And the risk of getting behind the wheel when I am that exhausted or mentally not in the right place to go and train is higher than the reward of going to the gym and actually training.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not effective for any of the parties involved. Like, it's not effective for you going into the session. The outcome that you're going to get from the session isn't effective. It's not then effective for you with the patients that you're having to look after at work. Like, you've got to put all those things into consideration. I think, like I say, communicating, being flexible, and just understanding that people talk about blueprints for bodybuilding, and they're like talking about them in these imaginary scenarios where people don't have any life stresses or like jobs or like any of these things. It's like, you have to realize we're human beings and we've got going on. So taking that stuff into account is so important. And it's definitely like really interesting to hear how you talk about just being able to manage that, and that it is possible and it is doable. And I think that's what a lot of people think isn't the case. And I think that people listen to what you're able to deal with at work and still being an incredible bodybuilder, it can hopefully put into perspective for them that, you know, they can do whatever they're doing and still also be successful and enjoy it as well.
Yeah. Like I know quite a few healthcare professionals who are competitive or do bodybuild but haven't competed. But I also work with a lot of people who say, "Oh, could never do what you do. I could never do what you do. Oh, you got chicken and veg again, Yas." And it's like, well, yeah, I do have chicken and veg again because that's what I choose to eat and that's what I choose to have on my plan. But you could do what I do because I am physical proof that it is possible. there are a number of people who are also proof that it is possible, but you just choose not to. And that's okay. That's okay if you don't want to do that sort of thing. That's absolutely fine. But they do also tend to be the people who are like, no, could never do what you do, as they sit there with a glass of wine in hand.
You're not physically incapable. You're just
exactly. You just choose not to in terms of mindset. But it's hard work, and I think it's the unknown side of things people are afraid of. Yeah, but also it's what you balance in your life, like you were just saying, what you balance in your life as well. People do think it's a blueprint when it's really not, unless you have all the money in the world and all the time in the world and absolutely no dependents or nothing to interrupt your day. Where you can just do everything as you want it, the same every single day, and be the perfect bodybuilder. There's going to be something at some point that interrupts your flow, whether you see it coming, whether you know it's coming, or whether it just hits you straight in the face. It sometimes happens. I don't go to work and think, yeah, I'm going to be too tired later to go and train. Never ever go with that mindset, because you don't know what's going to happen. And then I might have a day that is super busy, but I feel full of energy and I just go to the gym anyway. And then might have the best session that I've had in so long. And you're like, oh, do you know what? It is possible when you're really tired. But then you also have days where you're so tired that you can't even keep your eyes open. So yeah, flexibility in this sport and understanding your body and communicating those things with somebody are so important.
Thank you very much for giving that insight, because it's been amazing to hear you talk about all the process, but especially that with how you've managed, work and how you manage your whole bodybuilding process is really amazing. I've definitely taken a lot away from it, and I know that a lot of other people will do as well when they listen. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Yas.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming on. And obviously everyone keep updated with what Yas is doing at Worlds and with the rest of the process as well, because it'll be very exciting to see. And if you don't already follow Yas, definitely give her a follow on Instagram. She's _Yas Olivia, and I'll make sure to put that in the description. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And everyone, if you've listened to this episode and if you've enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow and rate us on Spotify. And just thank you as always for listening. And I'll be back with another episode next week.